Understand I was followed by I'm following some children. I've been in politics long enough to know you can never beat out the cute faces. But very excited to be here. Very excited to be officially qualified for the U.S. Senate, representing the great state of Louisiana. The reason why I'm running for Senate in this particular moment is because our country and our state is at a crossroads. The politics in D.C. are making our citizens sick. As Americans, we know what it's like during a time of crisis. We know what it's like to step up in that moment. We saw what happened after 9/11. As Louisianians, we know what it's like to be neglected in a time of crisis. With COVID ravaging our communities, public health, and economies, we cannot afford for that to happen again. So that's the reason why I'm stepping up in this particular moment, because this moment is calling for strong, decisive leadership in D.C. The House sent a bill to the Senate over 2 months ago that would have provided much needed relief to the working families of Louisiana. I wish that the Senate had the same sense of urgency that those families that are worried about how they're going to feed their children tomorrow or in the upcoming weeks that they have. Being a mayor of the third largest city in Louisiana, I have seen this, I have heard my citizens talk every single day. And again, we cannot afford it. This is a moment where we can come together as Louisianians, the seniors in our community, the millennials, Generation Z, the working families, and we can come together and we can choose a new road. I'm hoping that all Louisianians will join me on that new road and choose some decisive leadership that will go to D.C., stay above the fray, and fight for Louisiana's best interests. At this time, I'll take questions.
Your entrance into the race was a little bit towards the end of the campaign cycle. How do you expect to quickly start fundraising? How much money do you think you're going to need for the race? And are you concerned about the tight timeline that you're working under?
Yes, so, and honestly, I've been very busy as the mayor of Shreveport. I had no intentions at the beginning of this year or even months ago for running for this position. But as I've highlighted, the pain and suffering that I've seen in my community with public health when it comes to our economy and the lack of relief from our federal delegation has driven me to make this decision. Now, this is not a fool's errand. I made this decision after doing my share of due diligence, after reaching out to state leadership, after reaching out to national leadership, reaching out to me as well. We know that we have the confidence that with our message, being a viable candidate, that we will be able to generate enough resources to make this an extremely competitive race and challenge Senator Cassidy so that we can get leadership in D.C. that Louisiana desperately needs. So my background, I'm a Shreveport native, born and raised there. I grew up in a neighborhood named Cedar Grove. It was a high crime, low income neighborhood. My mother raised me and my 2 older brothers. My father left when I was about 3 years old, and what we didn't have in resources, my mom more than made up for in values. I grew up in a very Christian household. My mom also somehow magically earned her bachelor's degree by the time I was in middle school, so education was important. By the time I was in high school, I was an all-state athlete here in Louisiana. I was recruited by a lot of schools, and then September 11th happened. At that time, I answered that call, and I went to West Point, signed up, went to West Point, became the class president at West Point, and after graduation, I went on into the military where I served in Iraq. I did a tour in Iraq, and I did 2 tours in Afghanistan as a platoon leader, operations officer, and company commander. So I led in battle while I was there. After I returned from Afghanistan, I went to Harvard Law School. I wanted to turn the page and enter another chapter of my life. I thought when I entered Harvard that I would go off to work at some corporate firm in some big city, thinking that I would come back to Louisiana much later in life. But when those calls came to me, I couldn't answer them because my city seemed to need me a lot more than those corporate law firms did. So made the decision to come back home and run for mayor. I was successful in that run, and I've been serving the citizens of Shreveport for almost 2 years now.
How old are you?
I'm 34.
Mayor, there'd be some criticism that you're abandoning your post as mayor only less than 2 years after you won the election. How do you respond to that?
Well, I'm a military man, and I'll never abandon my post. My heart is with Shreveport. My energy and effort is with Shreveport. The same things that I'll be fighting for on this campaign trail are the same things that the citizens of Shreveport need so desperately in this moment. Like I said, I have working class families right now that are very much relying on that $600 federal supplement to take care of their families, to provide food on the table tomorrow, to provide clothing, to get their kids ready for school, to provide housing. We have lost hundreds of jobs in our community. So their working families, a lot of those working families don't even have the option to go back to work if that was available. We need somebody that's going to be fighting in D.C. for Shreveport, for Louisiana, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'd never abandon Shreveport or my state.
You don't think the senator is, to this point, adequately fought for that kind of funding for the extension of the $600 supplement and other help that you believe we should have in Louisiana?
Yeah, I do not. And aside from my opinion, there is the fact that the House passed a bill 2 months ago. That bill's not perfect, but again, I think if the senators in the Senate right now knew what it was like for struggling families, the family that I grew up in, and knew what type of psychological toll it was taking on them, to think about how they're going to provide, I think they would have acted much faster. Again, this is not time for political games or political posturing. It's time to fight for our citizens and be able to provide for them in a time of crisis.
Obviously, it is difficult to defeat a sitting incumbent, and Louisiana is generally considered a red state.
Yes.
So how do you get in the race 4 months before the election and unseat a Republican incumbent in a red state?
Yeah, so this is one of probability, and I'll tell you, my entire life, I've always taken chances. Nobody thought that the grandson of a sharecropper would go to West Point and become the class president. Nobody thought that a kid raised by a single parent in Cedar Grove could go to Harvard Law School, and nobody thought that I could beat an incumbent when I came back to Shreveport as a political upstart. But every time I've overcome answering a call of service, right now our state, the working class families of our state are calling for help from D.C., and we are not getting that in this particular moment. So I understand the odds, but we cannot afford to give Senator Cassidy another chance on providing what we desperately need in Louisiana. This is our time to choose a new road, our time to join hands together and choose leadership that's going to serve the best interests of Louisiana.
Where do you stand on some of the hot button issues like, say, abortion?
Yeah, so I'll tell you this. There are people that are operating in good faith on both sides of this particular argument. I think that a woman should consult her God, her family, and a healthcare professional when making that particular decision. But we can't just think about being pro-choice or pro-life within that snapshot. That extends to providing child care once that child is born for those working class families that can't afford that. That pertains to providing a good quality education where zip code doesn't determine the outcome of that. That pertains to providing health care, access to health care afterwards as well. So again, the very narrow parochial definition of being pro-choice, no, but overall I'm very much pro-life, I'm sorry. I'm very much pro-life, and I want to do all that I can to support and protect the lives here in Louisiana.
But when you say you're pro-life, do you think that means you think abortion should be outlawed?
No. So again, I don't think that we should narrow pro-life. Being pro-life and supporting life is not so narrow to talk about just abortion alone. I think you got to go beyond that. You got to take care of life from inception throughout its entirety. We need leaders that's going to be protecting life right in this moment. As I've talked about, right now we're in a crisis where families can't provide for kids. In April, for instance, there was a survey done where 20% of Louisianans were already cutting back on food. How is that not protecting life? By making sure that they have the resources to feed themselves.
I understand that, Mayor, and that's certainly a valid point, but you still hadn't answered the question. Do you believe Roe v. Wade should be overturned, or do you support it?
And just to go back, I said that a woman should consult with her God, absolutely, in making that decision.
Last question, really?
You guys seem to be having fun with this.
No, I was going to ask
No,
about campaigning in the middle of a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you are well known in your portion of the state, but how do you get your name ID up in the rest of the state when it's difficult to campaign right now?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting moment right now. Obviously, we're going to have to heavily rely on technology, but we're also going to heavily rely on our messaging. Louisianians do not feel very comfortable in this moment. There is not a lot of faith in government that they will provide and step up when they're needed. Like I said, there are thousands of Louisianians in this moment that don't know what's going to become of their income over the next couple of weeks. So we're going to strike the right chord. We're going to raise enough resources so that the people in the other parts of the state get to know the mayor from Shreveport, and we have a lot of confidence that we're going to be successful in this run.
I'll give her one more question since she's here.
Yeah.
What inspiration would you give the younger generation that's looking up to you as a mayor and as a leader?
I guess my words to that younger generation is, don't believe in probability or statistics. Carve your own path. Don't let your past define your future, and you can accomplish anything. I'm standing here before you today because of deacons at my church that wrapped their arms around me when I didn't have a father in the household, made sure I pulled up my pants. I'm standing in front of you because of educators in our community that took time after class to make sure I got those concepts. I'm standing in front of you today because Shreveport and Louisiana wrapped their arms around me, and I was able to beat a lot of odds. So that's what I tell the younger generation, to believe in themselves, and they'll be able to beat the odds as well. Louisiana is a place that will very much take care of them.